Hello readers and writers, I'm MJ and today is time for my August wrap up. So I actually thought I read more books in August. I only ended up reading 7 books, which actually really kind of surprises me. But they're really good books that actually stuck with me, so I guess that's better than the last couple of months. Also, I was working really hard on getting Phoenix ready to go to the publisher, so it did limit the amount of books that I had to read. The same's going to be happening this month in September. I need to get Berg ready to go to the publisher, so that also is going to impact the amount of books I'm going to read. Also, I ended August in the middle of 2 books, fairly far into the middle of them, and so that also decreases the amount of totals that I read in August. And there's nothing wrong with reading 7 books. It's a very decent amount of books to read in a month. It's just, I thought I had read more. So August is the first month in a while that I've actually read a book that's over 500 pages. So I'm very excited about that. My under 300 page books are very low, and that's not to discount books that are smaller, because I just wrote one right there, Lucas. There's a lot that can be compacted into a smaller book, but I also tend to overwhelm myself with the size of the book, and so think of quantity over quality, and that also isn't healthy. Most of the books that I read were between 300 to 499 pages. All of the books that I read in August were fiction, because I did not finish the nonfiction book that I started. This is not something that has been a consistent pattern for me. I have been fairly gravitating towards nonfiction, and it does make me wonder why there wasn't one finished in August. Probably just because I didn't finish the one I started. Ironically, my highest read category this month is historical, which I don't think has ever been a thing for me before. I know, very weird. Of the 7 books I read this month, 3 of them were indie, which is a little lower than honestly I thought also, but all of them were spectacular books that I'm very happy to tell you about. I have read most of them in print, 71% and 29% in digital. I'm currently not reading an audiobook like at all, just because I moved in and reading has been like my time away, and there just hasn't been a lot of opportunities for me to really read an audiobook. I'm not even in the middle of an audiobook right now, which is wild for me. So let's get into what I read, starting at what I read first to what I read near the end of the month. So this book is probably why I felt like I should have read more nonfiction and didn't. Star Trek Federation, the first 150 years. It reads like a nonfiction book, but I mean, unfortunately Star Trek doesn't exist, or fortunately, I guess, depending on your viewpoint, and so it is actually fiction. This is a fantastic book that goes through like the 150 years of Star Trek. It would be like if you're reading through a history book, except this one didn't actually happen. It was very well done. I was very surprised to find out that the author of this book hasn't written any other Star Trek books. He did write on Star Trek Enterprise, which does make sense why he was writing in this time period, but no other Star Trek books. This is his first and potentially only one. I didn't research that too much. This is part of my journey through Star Trek, however I have not made a short about it yet, so I really do need to do so. It was a fascinating read. The next book that I read is The Blood-Born Dragon. This is an indie book that I picked up, and let me just tell you, it is fantastic. If you like epic fantasy and you want it sapphic, then you should absolutely pick up this book. I'm not sure if I mentioned it is an indie release. Second book is out. I do plan on getting it. I absolutely want to get it and will be getting it, but I have some other indie books that I need to finish reading first. But I adored this book. The main character is just like wants to be rough but isn't necessarily rough, and then like all these things just kind of happen to her, and she gets kind of caught up in this journey that she didn't expect, and she gets bonded to a dragon. She has an extremely complicated relationship with an ex-lover who of course continues to follow her throughout the book. It is so well written, so well presented, and the cover is amazingly stunning. If this at all sounds interesting to you, you should absolutely pick up this book. Then I picked up Transcription. This has been sitting on my shelf forever, and somehow I thought it was science fiction or like speculative fiction. It is not. It is historical. It is set in the United Kingdom during World War II, and our main character is a female spy. And it kind of goes through her complicated life of getting admitted to the industry or something like that, fairly young, because, you know, she is parentless at the time and just kind of needs a direction of some place to go. She gets caught up in this and it never is allowed to leave, basically. And so this very interesting series of events happens where she is, of course, like a woman who has very limited opportunities in society, but also extremely intelligent, a woman who kind of makes her way through while still also like fitting the gender roles of the times. Just kind of to see the work of the spycraft, which is actually surprisingly kind of the boring part of the book, actually. And just like, it was very interesting read. Definitely different than something I would normally pick up. But, I mean, if you're into that, if you're really into historical and that sounds interesting to you at all, then yeah, I think you should read this. It was well written and well put together. I enjoyed my time with it. My next read is another indie read called Lost Rose, and this is the sequel to Lucky Penny, which is one of my favorite reads of last year. And Lost Rose it lived up to the hype in my own head, where we kind of finished the story arc of a sister who had gone missing in the forest 10 years ago, and we kind of find out what happened to her in this book. I will say that I did know the ending at least halfway before the book was over, but that didn't like diminish my connection to it or wanting to keep reading and keep seeing how it was going to play out. I meant to make sure I was right, but that also means that the author laid really good clues. I don't know, really well presented clues to get to the conclusion. Like it made absolute sense how it ended, and in some ways I feel indication for some of the characters. I really have connected through them without the book, and it's so ironic because like I keep saying, you know, I'm not really into YA, but there's these books, YA books that come in that I really do connect with. The main characters are very much age appropriate, but they're not necessarily so over dramatic that I can't like relate to them. And there is a young adult book. It's not written for adults. It is written for young readers, and it will completely engage and connect with them. It just happened that I, as an adult, also engaged and connect with them. So if you are into YA mysteries, I definitely recommend that you pick up this duology. Honestly, probably anything by Anar Buttersby is probably fantastic, but to date I have only read the duology, but I do plan to pick up more because I thoroughly enjoy her writing style. I was just on a thriller kind of mystery kick this month, and so I picked up an arc that I had listened for The Lie and finally read it. This book was very interesting. So I think 5 years prior, there was a situation where the main character lost their memory when their best friend was murdered, and everybody in her small town thinks that she did it. And now she kind of gets coerced by her grandmother to come back to the small town. And well, there's this podcast called Listen for the Lie that started that has kind of brought her story to a national level, and since she has just lost her relationship and lost her job because of it, she kind of has very little choice or very little reason not to then go back for her grandmother. And all sorts of everything commences that you could expect. You find out what does end up happening, and it is both not surprising and surprising at the exact same time. It was a fantastic read. The incorporation of the podcast into it, the relationships, and then just kind of being with the main character as she gets her memory back. I really enjoyed it. So if you're in the mood for mystery thriller, another one that I highly recommend you pick up. So the next book that I read is The Women by Kristin Hannah, and this is published by St. Martin's Press. And so I'm not going to leave a review right now. I will say that there has been a boycott going on for St. Martin's Press because of some problems within the publishing house. And there has been an organization called Readers for Accountability, as well as a group of St. Martin Press authors that have been working towards an agreement end to this boycott. And this has been going on for over 10 months, with St. Martin Press being mostly, if not completely, silent on it. And St. Martin's Press finally came out with a statement with a plan, and Readers for Accountability ended the boycott. That did not necessarily go over very well, and I don't believe Readers for Accountability is a thing anymore. This is a very complicated issue. There was a TikToker that actually called for the boycott, I guess you would say, or pointed out the problems specifically towards Palestinians. And I do not follow that TikToker because I am not appreciative of her communicative style, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't have valid points. I just think a lot of times she says the points without backing them up with the facts, even if the facts are there. And made a very good point about the statement not specifically calling out racist intent towards Palestinians. And I don't want to go specifically into this so much because I don't have any new information, any new perspective about the situation. Because there's just so much that has been thrown out that I'm still verifying facts and such, as Readers for Accountability being made up of all white readers is not been my understanding. Was something that was said, and the authors that are also behind publishing with St. Martin's Press that were pushing towards an end to this boycott and wanting to support them as well. Also, obviously, Kristin Hannah is huge. It's not going to impact her near as much as some of the smaller authors. It's a very complicated situation, compounded by the fact of it is a corporation, and corporations have to follow laws when it comes to matters of certain employees. And there's even more specific laws in New York where the publishing house is housed. And so I don't have answers about what I'm going to do. I think there's a lot to process. I think it is a sad state no matter what, because the boycott really has come down to a personal level. And it's hard to know if the statement that St. Martin's Press at least is going to be held to accountability, or have the transparency to be held to accountability, because I do think it took a lot for them to come out with that statement. Working in corporate spaces, I know how much behind the scenes will have gone on to even make that public. Wanting to support these authors, because there are BIPOC authors, there's trans queer authors, there's a lot of authors that are hurt by this boycott. Because yeah, you can still purchase the books, but if you're not reviewing them and calling attention to them, then they're not getting the publicity to then get more. And so it's a very complicated situation. I don't have an answer for it yet. So I don't know. That's where I stand at the moment. That's my review of that book. The last one that I read is Casualty of Fate. This is an indie release, another thriller, epic thriller, that was actually book fairy to me, which was super fantastic. And again, too long to get to reading it. I enjoyed this book. I know I'm obviously within such a mystery thriller vibe. This month I read so much of it, and this was so well presented, put together. There was a surprise. The ending worked very well, and I enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the characterization, the relationships, the switch in time and POVs was done fantastically well. I will say it does need a professional edit. Specifically, I did not have one and I was spotting a lot, but that doesn't mean it's not worth reading. I am sad that this book's like 4 years older and it looks like a sequel has not been published. That has definitely made me sad. I would have immediately purchased it if it was available so I could know what happened next. Maybe not immediately, because again I have a list of other indies I need to read, but it would definitely be on my get the sequel list. Oh, and it is if it ever releases. I do recommend it, just be very aware that it does need a good proofread that going in. So this is the end to August wrap up. If you see any books that you like, please let me know. Let me know what you read in August and what you think I should read. As always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.